It's Cinemaholics Live with John Negroni,
musical guest
Will Ashton,
and your host
Kurt Cobain.
Oh man, that is an all-star lineup.
Will Ashton, how are you doing?
Okay, I'm happy to talk to you. It's been a little bit.
Well, I think we're starting off with something a little bit concerning, which is talking about a movie called Saturday Night, but on a Monday afternoon. Very strange.
I know. And I saw it on Wednesday night. So it's coming out on a Friday. What's going on?
And I saw it on a Tuesday night. I mean, we're all over the calendar, but we're not where we're supposed to be, I guess.
Sure. I did have a thought, and I know they would never do this, but I feel like there's a version of this movie that would be really fun if they did you remember that Woody Harrelson movie, Lost in London?
No.
Okay. It came out in 2017, and it was like all filmed live. Like it was through a Fathom event, and they just like recorded it in the moment, and like whatever happened. I feel like it would have been fun if they did that with this movie. It probably would have been a disaster, but
probably, yeah.
To the Saturday Night Live formula, I thought that would have been fun.
Yeah, I hate to say it, Will, but I think your pitch probably wouldn't have made it through to Jason Reitman's ears. Not gonna lie to you, but hey, here we are now, Saturday Night, which this is a movie that I gotta admit I was looking forward to. I wasn't, punching, the roof and shutting the windows, being like, when's this movie going to come out? I can't wait. I'm tired of waiting or anything like that. But it is one where when I was looking at the slate of stuff that's going to be coming up for award season, I'm not going to lie to you, Saturday Night was pretty close to the top of my list. That's for sure. I mean, it just looked like my kind of movie, and it's in limited release right now, and it's going to be opening wide this weekend. So hopefully a lot of the folks who are listening to us talk about it. And actually, you know what? I want to mention this because it's something that I'm sure they had in mind when they were putting this movie together and figuring out the release date. But there is something pretty fitting about this movie coming out, coinciding with the 50th season premiere of the actual Saturday Night Live show. I mean, it's kind of cool how that worked out, I think.
And it's the 49th anniversary is the date it goes wide, right? October 11th?
Yeah, October 11th is when it's going to be hitting wide through Sony, and October 11th, 1975 is when the first episode of Saturday Night Live debuted. Back then it was called Saturday Night, but you get it. Now, this is an interesting one. I did an instant take of the movie, so I already kind of shared my thoughts. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I had a lot of, little miffs with it, little criticisms that we'll probably get into. And one thing I did note is that it seemed like there were some critics who were really poo-pooing on this movie a bit more than I expected, kind of giving it the business. And I'm curious where you're going to land on the spectrum for that. But real quick, Sony Pictures is the one doing this one. It premiered at Telluride Film Festival. Clearly, it's a movie that a lot of folks have some high hopes for in terms of Oscar season, or at least they did. I don't know where that stands at this current moment, but it's a big cast with lots of folks that you have probably seen in other Oscar, bait sort of projects. Specifically, Gabriel LaBelle is the main guy here, reprising his role as a 1970s young Jewish man, playing, or a famous, before they were famous, kind of young Jewish man in the 70s. So last time in The Fabelmans, it was Steven Spielberg. This time it's producer Lorne Michaels.
I think you mean Sammy Fabelman.
Sammy Fabelman? Yeah, sorry. I guess it was a little bit more coy, wasn't it? But we have a lot of other folks here too. We have, well, actually, you know what? Speaking of folks in Oscar-y movies, there was Cooper Hoffman from Licorice Pizza is in this one. But then we also have Rachel Sennott, who plays Rosie Schuster, Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd. We have Ella Hunt as Gilda Radner. We have Cory Michael Smith as Chevy Chase. I mean, and Matt Wood as John Belushi, I think relative unknown. So quite a cast. Will, I think, you know what? I'll set it up. It's a 90-minute movie. Literally, it's supposed to be in real time, the 90 minutes leading up to the first airing of Saturday Night Live, then Saturday Night. And that's really the movie. Interesting format, interesting structure. What'd you think of this one? Did you enjoy it?
Well, I guess I should say my expectations, I guess, were a little bit more nuanced. I am someone that just has sort of a complicated relationship with Saturday Night Live. I feel like, I grew up watching the DVDs of famous, 90s SNL actors, the best of compilations. I've watched a lot of SNL from, the past, the present, I guess I shouldn't say present because I haven't really kept up with the more recent seasons because I find them to be rather nauseating to watch.
I prefer the word cringe.
Sure, cringe is definitely one that can fit. But, it's something that, I think it started out with noble intentions. It's become an institution, as these things do when they're 49 or 50 years old at this point. And, I think they've ushered in a lot of talent. I think there are a lot of people that I love that have gone through SNL and have catapulted their careers because of SNL. And there are also some folks who I think were underserviced by SNL, but had found their stride thereafter. And yeah, I mean, as a show, I think it has its place in history for a reason. I think, it was revolutionary for its time. I don't know if I was looking forward to Jason Reitman's take on it because obviously he's the son of Ivan Reitman and he has close ties to a lot of these actors. Obviously Dan Aykroyd and, John Belushi. Well, I guess that's actually John Landis, I should say. But in any case, I think it's a movie that, and also I should say that, I think Jason Reitman, outside of his collaborations with Diablo Cody, have been fairly mixed at best. I wasn't crazy about Ghostbusters Afterlife. Men, Women, Children was very good. Labor Day wasn't very good. I thought The Frontrunner was fine. I think he's been kind of sagging since Young Adult, which might be his best film. Though I really do like Up in the Air as well as Thank You for Smoking. I think he has talent, and I think there's a lot of talent on display here, but, I guess much like SNL, I think it's, it's in the service of something that doesn't really feel in the best interest of the product. I think, it's sort of galvanizing in a way that feels unexploring and, just kind of shallow. It doesn't really seem to look too deeply into most of these real life figures, and sometimes just sort of glosses over them in the interest of focusing on other people for better or for worse. And, as a thrill ride, as, I think you said on Letterboxd, a sort of like roller coaster ride version of SNL, I think it has a lot of fun qualities. I was never bored. I was really engaged watching it. I think it's well paced and well blocked.
Not a roller coaster. I would call it like a dark ride. At like like Pirates of the Caribbean. You're just kind of like chill. Like everything else is chaotic except for you as you're going through it.
Like a robotic, Milton Berle is just like, look at my penis. Look at my penis.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, an animatronic
right.
Uncle Milty.
Yeah. In any case, yeah, I mean, I think overall, I enjoyed the ride. I was really enjoying the movie as I was watching it, but it left a sort of weird, sour aftertaste in my mouth. And I can't say, it's one that has grown more favorable on me, but it hasn't, I am not a cynic in the complete sense on it. I think it works for what it's trying to do. I just wish it was a little bit better and willing to be, maybe even a little bit more critical of these people in a way that, I don't know. I feel like there's a sort of unintentional bittersweetness quality to this film in the sense of like, you see these sort of radical figures of their time, but they become the sort of people that they're poo-pooing. I especially think that's the case with Lorne Michaels. I think that's also the case with Chevy Chase. But, I think just looking at it as a film, as a pure piece of entertainment, it's funny, it's fast, it's entertaining. I think most people who love SNL will get what they want out of it. I just, like SNL, have sort of complicated feelings about it.
Yeah, I think we've had plenty of conversations about how I'm a little bit more of a stooge for SNL. I embrace the cringe. You reject it wholeheartedly. And yeah, because I do still watch the show. And similar to you, I grew up really watching some of the classic stuff through the DVDs and all that. And I think the big issue I have with this movie is maybe a little different. I wasn't really wanting them to overly investigate these characters. I guess I wasn't craving that as much because I sort of liked the vibe. I liked what they were going for, which was let's put on a show. Everything's going to go wrong, but we'll figure it out if we work together.
Sure. And say the Rec Center Muppets kind of vibe. Ironic given
very
Muppets are here. Yeah.
The Muppets are in yes, there are Muppets in the movie, although maybe not Kermit and the gang. Don't get your hopes up too high, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to some of the movies we've seen recently that basically take a real life event and kind of add a Hollywood jazz to it, right? So your movies like Tetris, your movies like Blackberry and Air is a pretty good comparison to this one of like, it's pretty low stakes, but it's just the origin story of something that we know is going to be successful. But here's like the kind of interesting story of like how a bunch of people beat the odds and were good at their jobs for a couple of days or something like that. In this case, I think the only real glaring issue for me with this movie as I was watching it was like, it's kind of missing a climax. It has one technically. Like I see the screenplay and what But that's the clear weakness of the movie, is that you end with like, well, now we want to watch the show, but then you end it. So it's like,
I mean, I think the intent is that the climax is the actual episode, right? Like you're supposed to just watch that and kind of see how they pulled that all off and marvel at it. Even though a lot of the stories here are obviously doctored and like, a lot of the stuff that happens here didn't actually happen, but I don't know if the audience is necessarily expecting that. It's sort of a fantastical version of the making of the pilot, but.
Which I'm glad they did, because otherwise it'd probably be pretty boring of a movie.
But I don't mind that it didn't have a climax, just because I think you're just supposed to like, if the intent is to, celebrate SNL, I think the climax is you finally watch that premiere episode and then just see what they accomplish and appreciate it more. So I get that. I don't hate that.
I'm kind of surprised that they don't do, like at the very end of the movie, they don't do the kind of like, let's go through each character and tell you what happened to them with like white text over a still image.
I was wondering about that. Yeah. I mean, some of them would be sad, obviously. It's like Gil Radner and John Belushi would be pretty tragic. And a lot of the actors didn't really, have the same success. It's only really a handful that went on to do great things. And then also, like, even the relationships are mostly fractured after this, so it's supposed to be sort of a lightning in a bottle situation. But yeah, I was wondering.
I think the Chevy Chase one, there's such an opportunity with the Chevy Chase one to be proud owner of a used iPod Nano from 2006 to 2014. Sure. Honestly, I was thinking about that after this movie. I was like, man, imagine if Dan Harmon had written this movie. How unbelievable. Like, I don't know. I think you do need kind of a weirdo with something like this to really make it not just like serviceable, which this is. I think this is a serviceable award season movie. Kind of gets the job done. Very entertaining, pretty crowd pleasing. But if you want this to be like long lasting, like people are going to still be talking about this movie for years, like you want it to hit that stride, I think you need more of a weirdo. I think you need a Dan Harmon type person to really just investigate this stuff. As it is, Jason Reitman co-wrote it with Gil Kenan, not to be confused with that other Kenan, of course, but yeah, I think they collaborated also on that Ghostbusters movie that I didn't watch, Frozen Empire.
Well, they also wrote the previous one, Ghostbusters Afterlife, as well. And he's the director of Monster House.
Yes, Monster House from like, hey, speaking of 2006. So
speaking of Dan Harmon, because Dan Harmon wrote the script for Monster House.
I mean, it all kind of comes together, doesn't it? Will Ashton, doesn't it do that? Although he co-wrote that movie, I want to say.
Yeah, but you know who produced it?
I don't know who produced it.
Steven Spielberg, who we also name drop.
Monster House? Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think he was a producer on it. I remember.
But isn't Monster House Sony? I didn't think he produced Sony stuff, but okay.
I don't know. I think it was a I don't know. It's been.
It might have been in Amblin. Well, Amblin might have done some stuff on it.
Maybe.
That might be what you're thinking of.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Back to our hunch.
Well, you brought up the TV quality, and I don't want to dissuade the cinematic quality. It's shot on some really cool, grainy 16 millimeter film. I really love the attention to period details. The costumes look fantastic. I really love the hairstylings and the casting. Even though, I definitely have more thoughts on the casting. Let's bookmark that for one moment. I just want to make a point about. I feel like younger audiences who are going to watch this are going to probably compare it to like something like The Bear, that kind of frantic, like we got to like put this, event together, everything's sort of always on fire sort of mentality.
Spoken like a true person who hasn't watched The Bear.
I know.
Totally different energy. I get the comparison, but The Bear is very different. I'm
not saying it's a good comparison, but the show, I should say that it did honestly make me think of, for I think fairly obvious reasons, so I don't know if younger viewers even remember it, is Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. In the sense that they're also sort of galvanizing the idea of like writing comedy is serious business. Like it's not funny to talk about making comedy, and the sort of thing where it's, like people making impassioned speeches and stuff. That was an Aaron Sorkin show. And I think that was a show that was rightly lambasted. I don't think that this movie is necessarily on that level. I think that's probably the nadir of Sorkin's TV career, but
this movie is Sorkin curious. There's the walking and talking. There's the sort of like character dynamics and the like, let's squeeze in some romantic coworker drama here and there to kind of spice it up. There are little tidbits, that Reitman's clearly drawing from.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if if Reitman watched Studio 60 on Sunset Strip and was just like, man, if they actually did this SNL and did it better, it'd be so cool. I don't know. Maybe that's where the seed of the idea came from. I have no idea, but it's hard not to compare those two when you know about them. Yeah.
I'm curious if anyone has been comparing this to the franchise. I haven't seen that yet, but that's that show on Max about like comedy about making superhero movies and satirizing it.
Well, that's more like The Bubble, right? The Judd Apatow movie. I think that's what it's going for.
Okay. Well, hey, you know what? In that case, yeah, maybe that's a separate discussion, but let's talk about the cat.
That's the TV version of a movie, whereas this is the movie version of a TV show.
This is getting too complicated. Yeah. Let's go through the casting. I think the rule of thumb on the casting is thus. It works for the most part when it's somebody we don't know as well in like the kind of modern zeitgeist. So I think Lorne Michaels, like Gabriel LaBelle, I think is good in this. I think Cooper Hoffman is really good in this. I think Rachel Sennott is fine in this, but she doesn't do much. And I think some of the supporting stuff, I don't think Dan O'Brien really works as Dan Aykroyd. I don't think he tries a couple times, but I feel like for the most part, he's just kind of being himself. And it doesn't feel like Dan Aykroyd to me of that time or ever. And some of the female, like they're kind of anonymous performances here and there. I don't see Gilda Radner and Ella Hunt in this. I don't really see Lorraine Newman, but then you do have like Matt Wood as John Belushi, like, and Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase. And I think those are pretty good performances, but you know what it seems to be? I think it's because there's actually like writing there that gives them something to do besides an impression. And I think that's where it gets a little trickier. Like Nicholas Braun, I think his Jim Henson is iffy at best. And his Andy Kaufman it just feels like a gag. It doesn't feel like a performance. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. Cause it's like watching a movie in my head. I was doing some like mental bracket tiers. Like it's sort of like some people are giving, good performances and some people are doing like good impressions, but like maybe so-so performances. And some people are doing good performances and good impressions. And some people are like doing, like it's like all these sort of things. As far as the ones that you brought up, I'm not going to go through all of them because I generally agree, but I do nitpick about a few of them. I thought Matt Wood was fine. I wasn't really as taken by his Belushi. I think the writing actually sort of just shortchanges him. They just kind of make him like this like angry brute and doesn't really explore that complexity or have the room to explore that complexity.
Well, I kind of disagree, but okay, that's interesting.
I thought Rachel Sennott was pretty good. I think she's obviously the most developed of the female characters. I think the movie's biggest issue is how much it underserves the women, both in the
really is, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing; they disappear for such huge stretches, and I think that's the issue. I think Sennott, when she shows up and she's given material, yeah, she's good, but she disappears for huge. Like she's not in much in the beginning; she's barely in the middle. Yeah,
I think a lot of the cast members, like the women cast members, I don't know. There's like a sort of like wayfish quality to Gilda Radner that felt kind of insulting to me. Like it just kind of felt like, oh, she's just this goofy free spirit that's, like sort of out of it and all this stuff. And all the other women have like the sort of like tee-hee girly quality that felt kind of dismissive as well to me.
Yeah, I get the sense that like Reitman maybe was like talking to people who were there at the time, right? And was like, what were they like? And I feel like there wasn't as much investigation into some of these female actors. That's the impression I get. Whereas like some of the other folks like Chevy Chase, like, hey, what was really going through his mind? Let's make that part of the movie. And then I just don't see, it doesn't seem like that same care was put, cause I'm sure, there had to be so much going on with everybody that whole night.
I mean, I told you this off the mic, but I feel like Chevy Chase is the only one of these people, other than like the ones they directly antagonize, who the filmmakers have any sort of like mixed or complicated feelings about. And that actually makes Chevy Chase like the best part of this movie. I think Corey Michael Smith easily gives the best performance. I think
his scene with J.K. Simmons is probably my favorite scene.
Right. And J.K. Simmons is also very good. It's like, I don't know if he's necessarily doing a great Milton Berle impression, but his performance is awesome. I think he really...
That's a good example. Yeah. It's like good performance, bad impression, but I will take that over because that's how I feel about like Lamorne Morris. It's not a great impression of Garrett Morris, but it's a good performance. So I don't care.
I like that they actually gave him some decent time because he was obviously an actor who was like overlooked for his involvement with the show. And I like that they actually give him some focus, but I feel like in doing so, they probably overlooked the women because of that. Because I guess for some reason we can't have a focus on either, the minority character or the women. Like for some reason we have to pick and choose for some reason. I don't know. But in any case, maybe that's me being too presumptuous. In any case, I do really like Cooper Hoffman in this. I think he's awesome. And there's a scene where he's confronting Gabriel LaBelle and he does the underhand point it gave me chills because it's like, that is Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, it was like a moment where he really channeled his dad, and like, I don't even know if it was an intentional way. I just thought that was really cool. And
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to see him back, too, because, there was Licorice Pizza, but he hasn't done a ton since then. He did one other movie called Wildcat, and I don't think he was a major character in that.
No,
that was an Ethan Hawke movie.
Yeah, I saw that one. He's like a supporting actor. He's like,
right,
somewhere between a supporting actor and a cameo in that movie.
He does have two other movies coming out. There's Old Guy, which is already in post, and then there's The Long Walk, which they're literally filming right now. That's the new Francis Lawrence movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a Stephen King adaptation. But anyway.
Oh, okay. Apparently Sony has
Hoffman,
high hopes for that one, I heard.
I would hope so. Yeah, I mean he's a talent, and then some.
But I will say, I think we should say, and I don't know how much this means to anybody, but it was a thought that I had, and I was really glad that you had it too. I was watching Cooper Hoffman in this, and obviously outside of like Philip Seymour Hoffman, I was like, this guy reminds me of somebody in his mannerisms and his look. And I was in like 10 minutes in, I was like, oh, that's Mike Overholtz, our co-host from
it is so Mike Overholtz. You know what part of it too? So Mike Overholtz is our co-host on Mad Men, for those of you who aren't aware of that other podcast we do. But what's so funny about that is I think a lot of it is because Mike is straight up, like, when I met him, he was such a big fan of, in particular, P.T. Anderson. So like a lot of Hoffman performances, a lot of, I think The Master he would talk about. So I think that Mike has just maybe like subconsciously channeled a lot of Seymour Hoffman over time. And so Cooper Hoffman just seems to be like this happy accident of like Mike Overholtz. It's uncanny, I think.
If they ever make the movie adaptation of Mad Men, our podcast, we know exactly who we're casting for Mike. So, yeah.
Well said. I enjoyed Tommy Dewey as Michael O'Donoghue. It's just a good supporting performance. I think it's like one of the more balanced performances, because I think it works because O'Donoghue, like, yeah, we've seen him in SNL from like that time, but he's not as like, he's known for his writing more. And that's where I think Dewey is really focusing the performance, and that's where it works. Like his timing, you can tell he's a writer more than he's a performer. It's like a very nuanced thing that I really appreciated. But then on the flip side of that, Matthew Rhys as George Carlin, I think is just a god awful, like, it's not a bad performance, but it's just, the impression of it is so bad that it kind of bugs me, because I'm like, George Carlin is too dynamic. Like, I don't envy Matthew Rhys. I think he was in a tough position there, but I just don't think the casting was right. I feel like so many other actors would have been better for that whole thing.
I thought he was fine. I didn't really take much issue with him, really. I just thought he was okay. I think he got like a lot of the facial mannerisms. I don't think he really got the voice or like the persona.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's a better performance, I think, than an actual. But I get it. He's not in a ton of the movie anyway, so it's not a big deal. But yeah,
and those are, you said, like big shoes to fill. I don't really know who I'd cast for that role, to be honest.
It's tough, but. Yeah, so that's a lot of the casting, if that gives you kind of a range. I mean, I've seen some opinions that are all over the place with the movie. Some people being like, actually, no, Dylan O'Brien's really good as Dan Aykroyd. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay.
Him. Yeah.
I mean, I like Dylan O'Brien. I've liked the guy since Teen Wolf episode 1. Give me a break. But that's the thing. He's my guy. I want him to soar and be successful for the rest of his life. Also, very buff. I'm going to give him some credit.
Sure.
He's got those shoulders going. Like, he's looking good.
I think his is an interesting sort of tier for me, in the sense that, like, I think for a movie, his impression of Aykroyd is like, okay, but if he did that at a party, I'd be like, whoa, that's a really good Dan Aykroyd impression. But like in a movie, it just felt like, yeah, it was okay. It's like solid. But I thought he gave a good performance.
I think you're being quite generous, but I don't blame you. Last, I'll say Willem Dafoe is Willem Dafoe, I guess, in this one. I think it's fine. Yeah, it's not it's a very functional role that he has. It's a very okay, I know exactly where you're supposed to be, and it works, for what it is.
I think he is appropriately slithery, and I think that's all they really wanted him to do, and I think he did that just fine.
They showed him a picture of Ike Perlmutter, like one of the 3 pictures that exists, and he was like, yeah, I can do that. I can pretend to be that guy. Okay, and you know what? I'm going to also give a lot of props to John Batiste, not just for his performance as Billy Preston, but also I really like the music in this. I like the sound design of it, the sound mixing. Like, I'm not expecting this to get awards for that stuff, but like, it's really good. There are really good motifs in here. I
mean, I'm surprised we didn't mention it before, but I think obviously one of the big influences on this film was Birdman. And obviously the way that movie incorporates jazz and like this sort of like high speed, frantic, jazzy energy is
moving down the hallways. Yeah. Like literally two characters will do something scandalous, but then we'll cut away down to the next thing right as that's starting to happen. Yeah. So yeah, good movie. I think we both enjoyed it, but clearly we have our qualms, we have our quibbles and such. That's fine.
I think it's pretty good. I think it's one of those movies that like I'll probably be more cynical if it actually gets like Oscars or like even like a lot of nominations. Cause I'm like, it's not that good.
I don't think it will.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to
say. I don't think
it
has the makings of an Oscar villain, but I get it.
I don't know. I mean, and I'm not even talking like Oscar villain. I just feel like it's just like one of those where it's like, it's not like a Bohemian Rhapsody where I'm like, this movie sucks and it shouldn't be nominated. It's more like, that's pretty good, but there are better movies this year, you know? Like, it's like one of those things.
Sure.
But one more I wanted to point out, because I think it's an example of a really good impression, but like a so-so performance, is the guy who's playing Billy Crystal. I don't know who that is, but like, he does, you know, like if I close my eyes, I'd be like, hey, it's Billy Crystal. But like watching
Nicholas
him, right? I'm watching him like, I mean, he's got the voice right, you know.
I should say, by the way, that it's not literally 90 minutes. The movie's actually 109 minutes. So it does play around with it. What?
Mm-hmm. I was mad about that. I wanted it to be 90 minutes, you know, like honor that showtime.
I guess they had to make some strategic decisions there. I don't know. But yeah, that would have been much nicer. Would have been cleaner. But
right.
Hey,
don't even have like full credits, just like do like on the screen, like an SNL where it just like goes super fast and just like, you know, I would have. I'm being tongue in cheek here, but like, it's an issue I had with that Al Pacino movie, 88 Minutes, where I'm like, this movie is 108 minutes. You had one job.
Yeah, one job. Did you actually watch the first episode yet, or rewatch the first episode after the movie?
Wanted to. I never got around to it. I've been
that's what happened to me
in work and horror movie watching that I never got around. But I do want to. I mean, I will say this movie does make you want to watch that first episode again. Yeah. Like I said, it's a climax, so I guess that's a big part of it. But yeah, it does its job there.
Yeah, it is helpful. I wonder if it's better to rewatch the episode before you watch the movie, because then a lot of the, you'll have that stuff fresh in your mind. I guess the only problem then is that that might actually hinder your experience watching the movie, because it might be too similar, but yet not similar enough, maybe. I don't know.
I do think, as someone who has watched a fair bit of SNL, there are a lot of Easter eggs in the film for like the show in general, like not just the pilot episode. And some of them are grown worthy and some of them are actually kind of fun and cheeky. But, I think that's another reason SNL fans will probably enjoy it. They'll catch a lot of those things, but I don't think they take you out of the movie.
I do appreciate that there's literally a scene where Gabriel LaBelle's Lorne Michaels is just like looking at this sad old man and being like, I don't want to be like that someday. And it's literally the real Lorne Michaels sitting down.
Right. Oh, wait, was it actually the real Lorne Michaels?
I'm assuming so, because it looked like him. You don't think so?
I don't know. I mean, I have to rewatch the tape, but I don't think that was him.
I really want to believe, because it looked just like him. Okay. All right. I don't want to get in trouble here and, get accused of slander and such. All right. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Let's take a look at this one and see what the critics are saying at large. We have 94 reviews counted. One of them is mine. Well, I like the movie, so that might help you a little bit. But yeah, you didn't get spoiled on this one, did you?
No, I think I heard somewhere that it's like positive, but I never got the score. So
okay. There's no popcorn meter, so we only have the tomato meter for this one. What do you think?
That's surprising we don't have the popcorn meter, because it is out in New York right now.
It's in limited. Yeah. It says here there's fewer than 50 verified ratings. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that they're adding more standards to what's actually going to show up for the audience score. Now known as the popcorn meter.
The Rotten Tomatoes score, I'm going to say 89%. You seem to be a little negative on how people are receiving it, but I've heard mostly good things outside of my letterbox.
Well, you're off by 10. I think you know what direction that 10 is going in. Yeah, no, okay. It's 79%.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's been pretty steady at around 79. Every time I've checked in, it's been around there pretty much.
I have a feeling, not because of the quality of the film, but I think, like when more critics watch this movie and review it, I think that rating will go up, because I think a lot of general critics will be kinder to this film. I feel like that's a lot of like the New York, LA critics who are going to be a little bit more huffy puffy and like, snooty about it, but I could be wrong. I have no idea.
I could see like a balance, of like some reviews like that, but then some that are a little bit more of like you were saying before, this is the Oscar villain, so that maybe they'll offset each other a little more and they'll just kind of stay in the 70s where Saturday Night belongs. Anyway, Let's take a look at, I actually didn't check if there's a cinema score. Let me see here. Yeah, no, we don't have a cinema score yet. That makes sense. But we can look at Letterboxd to get a pretty early, but at least some kind of sense of where this one's at. We have 14,000 watches on letterboxd.com. So what do you think the average rating is now? I'm sure it's going to change a bunch, but yeah, what's your best guess?
That's interesting. I'm going to say 3.4.
It is 3.6. Yeah, not bad. Yeah, pretty close, actually.
That was my first guess. Yeah, I don't think you'll believe that, but I was put off by the Rotten Tomato score being lower than I thought, so should have trusted my gut.
I see a few folks on here. David Chen, on his letterbox, he said, "At last, something for people who desire the intense reverence and self-importance of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, but in movie form." So, well, yeah, it looks like David Chen's on your same wavelength over here.
Sure. I will admit, I've heard more than one person say that, but that was the thought I had in my brain watching it too. It's not an original thought, to be clear.
It just sounds like you're having a shared mutual observation, which makes sense. Emily St. James, the wonderful Emily St. James, said, "All over the place, but it will teach a new generation of Americans about Milton Berle's massive hog. And for that, I click the heart." The heart being the letterbox, meaning you like it, the movie. Yes, I very much appreciate. I said it was my favorite scene.
Sure. I was wondering while watching it, like, I know like 2 or 3 things about Milton Berle. And like, one of them is that he hosts a notoriously disastrous episode of Saturday Night Live, which they winked to. That's one of the Easter eggs. But also, I'm like, the only other thing I know about this guy, other than he's a comedian, is just that he has a huge, famously large dick that has been confirmed multiple times. And I was like, I wonder if they're gonna like reference that. And they did. And I was like, okay, I guess that's their reference for it. And then they have another scene where it's like,
no, we're not done.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, Will? I will say too, because it is important to bring up, and in terms of the frenetic energy of this thing, I kind of wonder, Jason Reitman, he's not a young guy, relatively speaking, but I do wonder if movies like this, I know they do borrow so much from Sorkin, like we were saying, with the energy of it, but I do wonder if more and more movies, even award season movies, are going to try to be this, like, kind of like trying to match the pace that younger audiences seem to want, which is, it's the TikTok generation, the Vine generation, YouTube generation, folks who just, our attention deficit is so rough and severe that you kind of need a movie to just go, 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 go. And like, there can't be a dull moment. You kind of just have, things have to be happening. And I wonder if that's, we're seeing more and more of that pop up into our movies, of like the people making the movies are trying to cater to that audience more and more.
I mean, for whatever criticisms I have about the film, I much prefer this approach than like a more traditional biopic where it's just like, we're talking about the show, how it got green light. And then like, we see the scene where this happened and, all these sort of things in a more generic, traditional sort of way. I think this approach is a lot more fun and inventive, but also comes with its own problems at the same time.
Casey Lee Clark said, "Perhaps I have a chip broken in my brain where no matter what I am predisposed to love this. Or where no matter what, I am predisposed to love this. I knew the minute it got announced. I knew when I first saw the trailer, and I was right. Beyond being an SNL-loving kid, I love basically any 70s pastiche at this point. But the big sell, and the reason I probably loved it so much, was because it features 3 of my favorite young actors, Gabriel LaBelle, Cooper Hoffman, and Andrew Barth Feldman, who in their breakout lead roles in recent other films blew me away so much that I knew I'd follow them to the ends of the earth. I hear everyone's criticisms, but I really think I'm just not that cynical. I had so much fun and can't wait to see it again ASAP. In parentheticals, she also wrote, also, there's a scene in a stairwell where Cooper Hoffman is yelling and he reaches a cadence of body language where for a couple seconds he morphs into his father and my heart stopped. So yeah, Casey Lee Clark is on another same wavelength as you, Will. Fun shout out to Andrew Barth Feldman, who was in No Hard Feelings. You know what was weird though about his performance? He got more characterization as that guy Neil, who was just like kind of not consequential to the plot than a lot of the female actors.
Right. I mean, I do think the movie it focuses more on the crew than I expected. I will say.
I like that.
I appreciate that. It's a lot of times just mostly just like, hey, we're union guys. We're from New York. Forget about it sort of stuff. But at least it's something. It's not just like the show put on itself. But at the same time, yeah. I mean, I think he's supposed to be sort of a bit of an audience surrogate in some respects. I also really enjoyed Paul Rust as Paul Schaefer. The makeup's doing a lot of the work there, but I thought that was a fun touch as well. I mentioned that because him and Andrew Barth Feldman have a pretty notable scene together.
Jacob Knight said the reductive and frankly dumb take on this movie is that it's a glorification of Lorne Michaels, an enshrining of his place on the mainstream mantle that gives him all the credit for creating what is still, to this day, one of the enduring mainstays of American pop culture. Only from a cynically myopic angle could this be true, as Saturday Night is closest to Dolomite Is My Name in tone, a celebration of ragtag wannabes on the cusp of greatness raging against a system that doesn't want them to succeed. In truth, Michaels is operating more as our surrogate, a glorified NBC page cosplaying as a producer and leading us from room to room, while the true talent are each given their moments to both queen out and shine. While distracting at first, the babyface casting actually serves a purpose, reminding you that Saturday Night Live wasn't always an institution, but was initially viewed as just that, a bunch of children being laughed at by suits who had no intention of allowing their formless variety act to air, let alone become a sensation. So he goes on to say a bunch and a little bit more detail. I'm not going to read all of this, but yeah, I haven't seen that come out. Like, I haven't seen anybody be like, oh, this is glorifying Lorne Michaels. I get that the movie paints him in a decent light. It kind of paints him in, hey, yeah, he was kind of innovative, but I think the movie puts way more emphasis on it wasn't just him. It was this whole group of people, like the crew, the talent. It was a combination of everybody's efforts. Lorne was just kind of the one who came up with the idea and tried to shepherd it as best he could.
Half agree. I definitely agree that, it is like the variety show thing where it's like everyone comes together to make the show work. I do think the characterization, like I said before, for Lord Michael is relatively thin, but yeah, like you say, it's like partially he's an audience surrogate and partially I don't think the movie has any interest of being that critical, because a lot of the criticisms I think they're directed at Lorne Michaels are probably, later on. So I get that they don't want to like explore that in the time frame that they're trying to put this movie on. But at the same time, it's also just kind of like, I mean, does Lorne Michaels really need that many more pats on the back? Like, does he really need to be like celebrated that much more? I think he's got his flowers and then some at this point.
I agree. Jacob and I did have this one last thing though, and we'll finish with this. He said, on the flip side, the less said about Nicholas Braun's Jim Henson, the better. Those Andy Kaufman ain't half bad. And Matt Wood's Belushi ranges from passable to awful, seemingly from scene to scene. So, Will, you're not alone on your Matt Wood, disparagement, but I once again, I have to disagree with at least that last part. I like Matt Wood a lot in this.
I don't think he was ever awful. I just thought it was just a little, again, I think it was just sort of like similar to the Braun characters. It's just sort of just looking at them as sort of like comedic side characters that's not really like actually exploring their influence and who they were as people. It's just like, aren't these guys kind of quirky? Sort of thing. And they're dead, so we can, make fun of them a little bit.
Oh, we got to, sorry, Charlie Ridgely, we can't leave him out. He also had something to say on this. He said, oh man, I love this. I can already feel it's going to have some insane rewatch value for me. It's fast and frantic and chaotic and messy and moving and so deeply, deeply funny. That cast is operating in all cylinders. And honestly, I don't think a single one of them was any less than phenomenal. Matt Wood's Belushi feels otherworldly, and LaBelle is somehow even better in this than he was in Fabelman's. Somehow, though, I think Feldman steals it for me. He also said there's an irony to this movie coming out in the current era of SNL. It's all about coming together and fighting to bring forward a new voice that deserves to be heard. All the while, the modern-day Lorne is the old TV head stuck in his ways, refusing to let a generation of comedy blossom. It's hard to ignore, but I don't necessarily think the film lets him off the hook. He's not some infallible hero or anything. It just shows him as he was in that moment in time. And the film is more concerned with how great comedy comes from a thriving community, not just one guy with the vision. I also just need to say that nobody does Jim Henson wrong in this movie. In fact, he's portrayed as easily the kindest and most wholesome soul in the room, and it's very clear to see how this experience led him to one of the greatest TV creations in history of the Muppets. All I'll say to that, because I think the Muppets were already, happening at this point, but I get it. I get where he's coming from. I gotta say, yeah, that was definitely sticking out to me too. I think you brought it up. It is weird to watch this movie in context of like, it was counterculture, but like now it is what it is. I'm fine with that. Like, I'm at peace with that. Like, of course, modern SNL isn't like, it never could have maintained that and stayed that way. It became mainstream. It changed. That's fine. I think the counterculture now comes in other forms, and that's how life is. And that's, I don't think there's anything, stirring or unsettling about that. I think it's as natural as apple pie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what you say. I do push back on the Henson thing just because, like, if you look at his actual stuff from this time, like, not even talking about the Muppet stuff, like, it was pretty countercultural and radical and, like, avant-garde in its own way.
The coffee commercials that Matt Serafini and I share with each other.
I'm just saying that, like, he's not like this, like, Quaker guy who's, like, sheltered from, the evils and sins of the world or anything, I can at least forgive the Andy Kaufman thing because, like, he was probably method acting as, that version of Andy Kaufman. So that was probably the version of Andy Kaufman that they saw, and they didn't see, you know, the full Andy Kaufman. So that's fine, whatever. But I think the Henson thing is a little insulting to be blunt.
And to be clear, the Muppet Show was not out yet, but I think they had already used the Muppets in a lot of other stuff before. So that's the whole point, right? Is that like Jim Henson's Muppets were being used in things like commercials, and I don't remember if Sesame Street was quite there. Yeah, my history is fuzzy, but anyway, we don't have to dwell on that for sure. That'll do it for today's episode of Cinemaholics. Thank you so much for listening. Will, the next movie I'm going to be watching is going to be We Live in Time. I'm going to be seeing that on Wednesday. I would love to talk about that with you if you're interested. I know all you want to talk about is Terrifier 3. It's October.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that one. I am planning to see Joker 2 on Wednesday.
That's right. I keep forgetting Joker 2 came out. I want to forget.
I mean, I'm very curious about it. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm very curious about it.
It's pretty horrifically bad, but I bet you'll love it. Yeah, if you see Joker 2, we'll for sure have a conversation about that one. And we'll try to figure that out in due time. I think our next episode, or one of our next episodes rather, will probably be an instant take of We Live in Time. We'll see how it happens. No promises in this life or the next. But again, thank you for listening. Thank you so much. We'll be back soon from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.